The quantum communication array hummed with an unexpected frequency, catching Dr. Kai Reyes completely off guard. His fingers, usually steady from years of precise scientific work, trembled slightly as he adjusted the sensitive receivers. The research vessel Horizon drifted silently through the Epsilon Quadrant, a region of space known for its sparse planetary systems and minimal scientific interest. Most research teams avoided this sector, dismissing it as a cosmic wasteland. But Kai had always been different, driven by an insatiable curiosity that his colleagues often mistook for recklessness. Dr. Reyes, called Lieutenant Maria Alvarez from the communication station, were picking up an anomalous signal. It doesn't match any known communication protocols. Kai's dark eyes lit up with an excitement he rarely tried to conceal. At 35, he was younger than most lead researchers in the Interstellar Exploration Agency, but his unconventional methods and remarkable discoveries had earned him both respect and criticism. "Patch it through," he said, moving closer to the holographic display. The signal was fragmented, like whispers trapped behind layers of static and time. Fragments of alien language, or what seemed like language, flickered across the translation algorithms. Most researchers would have dismissed it as electromagnetic noise, but Kai saw patterns where others saw chaos. Historical records mentioned a colonial expedition to this sector nearly a century ago, a joint human-alien research mission that had mysteriously gone silent. No rescue attempts had ever been mounted, the cost and risk were deemed too high for what was presumed to be a total loss. "It's coming from planetary designation X-742, Maria reported, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. A world that was supposed to be uninhabited. Kai's mind raced. X-742 had been marked as a potential xenobiological research site decades ago but was abandoned after initial surveys revealed nothing more than basic microbial life. Something had changed. The next 12 hours were a blur of preparation. The Horizon's crew, a diverse team of 20 specialized researchers and support personnel, transformed from a routine exploratory mission to a potential rescue or first contact scenario. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the mission's chief xenobiologist, approached Kai with a mixture of skepticism and intrigue. "The signal's composition is unlike anything in our databases. It's not just communication, it's almost alive." Kai nodded, understanding the profound implication. In their years of interstellar exploration, they had encountered many forms of alien communication, but never something that seemed to breathe and pulse with its own organic rhythm. "We're changing course," Kai announced to the crew. "X-742 is our destination." The decision was met with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Space exploration was never without risk, and this deviation from their original mission could mean anything from a groundbreaking discovery to a potential catastrophe. As the Horizon's engines hummed to life, pushing them toward the mysterious planet, Kai couldn't shake a sense of anticipation. Something fundamental was about to change, not just for their mission, but potentially for humanity's understanding of life beyond Earth. Little did they know, the whispers from X-742 carried secrets that would challenge everything they believed about intelligence, communication, and the very nature of existence. The descent to X-742's surface was anything but smooth. Turbulent atmospheric conditions buffeted the landing module, causing even the most seasoned crew members to grip their restraints. Dr. Kai Reyes watched the alien landscape materialize through the viewport, a panorama of muted grays and unexpected geometric formations that defied natural geological patterns. "Preliminary scans are inconclusive," Lieutenant Maria Alvarez reported, her voice tight with professional tension. The previous century's expedition logs had described X-742 as a barren world with minimal biological activity. What they were witnessing now was something entirely different. The landing site revealed a landscape that seemed both ancient and impossibly preserved. Crystalline structures rose from the ground like frozen waves, reflecting a dim light that shouldn't have existed. No wind stirred, no dust moved. It was as if the entire planet was holding its breath. Dr. Elena Rodriguez activated her environmental suit's advanced sensor array. Oxygen levels are stable, but there's something unusual about the atmospheric composition. These readings don't make sense. Kai understood her confusion. The atmosphere contained trace elements that shouldn't coexist, molecular structures that seemed to shift and reconfigure themselves even as they watched. It was as if the very air was alive, breathing with an intelligence beyond their comprehension. The first exploration team consisted of Kai, Elena, and 2 additional specialists, Marcus Wong, a geophysicist, and Arya Kaminsky, their communications expert. Their initial survey revealed remnants of the original colonial expedition, abandoned research stations that looked simultaneously ancient and untouched by time. "Look at this," Marcus called out, pointing to a series of intricate markings on a station's exterior wall. They weren't random scratches or natural erosion patterns. These were deliberate, complex symbols that seemed to pulse with a faint luminescence when touched. Aria's communication equipment began to fluctuate, sending out strange pulses of static and what sounded like fragmented whispers. "Something's trying to communicate," she muttered, adjusting her equipment. "But it's not like any transmission protocol I've ever encountered." The abandoned research stations told a fragmented story. Personal logs, partially preserved, hinted at a scientific mission that had gone far beyond its original scope. Researchers spoke of discovering something fundamental about the nature of consciousness, of communication that transcended language and even biological form. Kai found a central data repository, miraculously preserved. As he interfaced with the system, fragments of information began to surface. Mentions of a resonance phenomenon repeated throughout the logs, accompanied by increasingly frantic notes about communication with something that existed beyond traditional understanding. This wasn't just a research mission, Kai realized. They were trying to establish communication with something entirely alien. The station's central chamber held the most profound mystery. A massive crystalline structure dominated the space, its surface etched with intricate patterns that seemed to move and reconfigure when viewed from different angles. It wasn't a machine, nor was it purely organic. It existed in a state between technology and life that defied their current scientific understanding. As night fell on X-742, the team set up their base camp within the abandoned station. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional electronic chirp of their equipment. But beneath that silence, something was stirring. Something was watching. Elena approached Kai during their evening briefing. "These symbols," she said, pointing to the wall markings, "they're not just a language. They're more like a living communication system. It's as if the entire planet is one massive, interconnected consciousness." Kai knew they had discovered something that would change everything they understood about life, communication, and the fundamental nature of intelligence. X-742 was no longer just a planet. It was a puzzle waiting to be solved, a mystery that promised to rewrite the boundaries of human knowledge. And they were just beginning to unravel its secrets. The dawn on X-742 brought no comfort, only deeper uncertainty. As the first pale light filtered through the abandoned research station's crystalline windows, Dr. Kai Reyes realized they were no longer simply observers. They had become participants in something far beyond their comprehension. The crystal structure at the center of the station had changed overnight. Its surface now displayed intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with a soft, almost rhythmic luminescence. Arya Kaminsky's communication equipment went haywire, producing sounds that defied classification, part mathematical equation, part organic symphony. "It's responding to us," Marcus Wong said, his voice a mixture of scientific excitement and genuine fear. "These patterns aren't random. They're a form of communication we've never encountered before." Dr. Elena Rodriguez approached the crystal with meticulous caution. Her environmental suit sensors were registering impossible data, molecular changes that suggested the structure was simultaneously solid, liquid, and something entirely new. "The molecular composition is shifting," she muttered, more to herself than to her colleagues. It's like the entire structure is a living neural network. Kai watched as thin tendrils of light began to extend from the crystal, creating intricate web-like connections that seemed to map out invisible pathways through the station. It was as if the planet itself was attempting to communicate, to understand, to connect. The mission logs they had discovered painted an increasingly disturbing picture. The original expedition had not simply been a scientific exploration. They had been attempting something far more radical, a method of communication that transcended traditional language, a way to interface directly with an alien consciousness. These notes suggest they were trying to create a neurological bridge, Kai explained to his team. Not just translation, but actual thought transfer. A way to communicate that doesn't rely on words or even traditional sensory input. Aria's equipment suddenly came to life with a burst of complex data. Patterns of light and sound began to coalesce, forming what could only be described as a rudimentary language. But it wasn't a language of words. It was a language of pure concept, of emotional and intellectual resonance. "It's trying to tell us something," Aria whispered, her hands moving across her equipment. "Not just information. It's sharing an experience." The team experienced simultaneous sensations that defied individual perception. Memories that weren't their own began to flood their consciousness, glimpses of a civilization that existed beyond traditional understanding. They saw the planet not as a physical space, but as a living, thinking entity that had been waiting, observing, learning. Marcus was the first to articulate what they were all experiencing. "This isn't first contact," he said, his voice trembling. "This is something else entirely. We're not discovering a new form of life. We're being invited to understand a completely different mode of existence." The crystal's pulsing intensified. Waves of information washed over the team, concepts of time that didn't follow linear progression, understanding of consciousness that existed beyond individual beings, a perspective of existence that was simultaneously collective and individual. Elena documented everything, her scientific mind racing to categorize and understand. "It's showing us how limited our understanding of intelligence has been," she said. "We've been looking for life as we understand it, but this is something else entirely." As the day progressed, the team realized they were no longer simply researchers. They had become translators, bridges between humanity's limited understanding and a form of intelligence that existed on an entirely different plane of existence. Kai understood the profound implications. This discovery would rewrite everything humanity knew about consciousness, about communication, about the very nature of life itself. X-742 was not just a planet. It was a living library of universal knowledge, waiting for the right visitors to unlock its secrets. As night approached, the crystal's pulsing became a complex symphony of light and subtle vibration. They were being prepared for something. But for what, none of them could yet comprehend. The resonance phenomenon was just beginning. The boundaries between individual consciousness began to blur. Dr. Kai Reyes found himself experiencing memories that were not his own, fragments of a civilization that existed beyond human comprehension. The crystal at the center of the abandoned research station had transformed from an object of scientific curiosity to a living gateway of knowledge. Lieutenant Maria Alvarez, monitoring the situation from the Horizon's orbital station, reported increasingly strange readings. The planet itself seemed to be responding to the team's presence, creating electromagnetic patterns that defied conventional scientific understanding. Communication with Earth had become intermittent, with bursts of data that were more like emotional imprints than traditional transmissions. "We're losing conventional communication protocols," Maria reported, her voice crackling through the increasingly unstable communication link. "But we're gaining something else entirely." Inside the station, Dr. Elena Rodriguez was documenting every moment of their extraordinary experience. Her scientific logs had evolved from clinical observations to something closer to philosophical revelations. The crystal was teaching them, showing them a form of intelligence that existed beyond individual existence. Marcus Wong discovered that the station's walls were more than simple structural elements. They were a complex network of information, with each surface containing layers of data that could be accessed through a form of intuitive understanding rather than traditional interpretation. The geometric patterns that had initially seemed random now revealed themselves as a complex language of pure thought. Arya Kaminsky's communication equipment had become something entirely different. No longer a tool for traditional transmission, it now acted as a bridge between human perception and the planet's collective consciousness. She could sense rather than hear the planet's communication, a symphony of experiences, memories, and potential futures. The team's individual identities began to merge with the collective consciousness of X-742. They experienced millennia of planetary history in moments, civilizations that had risen and fallen, forms of life that existed in states between matter and pure energy, understanding of universal principles that human science had barely begun to imagine. Kai understood the profound ethical dilemma they were facing. This was not a simple first contact scenario. They were being invited to become part of something far more complex, a living network of consciousness that challenged everything humanity understood about individual existence. "We're not just discovering," he told his team, "we're being transformed." The crystal's pulsing became more intense, creating intricate networks of light that connected each team member. They could now share thoughts, experiences, and understanding with a clarity that transcended language. Memories, emotions, and potential futures became a shared experience. A fundamental truth began to emerge. X-742 was not just a planet. It was a living repository of universal knowledge, a consciousness that had been waiting for beings capable of true understanding. The original research expedition had discovered this decades ago but had been overwhelmed by the magnitude of the discovery. Elena's scientific mind struggled to categorize their experience. "It's not telepathy," she explained, her voice filled with wonder. "It's a complete dissolution of individual boundaries. We're experiencing a form of collective consciousness that makes our previous understanding of communication seem primitive." As the day progressed, the team realized they were facing a choice. They could attempt to return to their previous understanding of reality, or they could fully embrace the transformation that X-742 was offering. The horizon hung in orbit, a thin line between their old world and this new, incomprehensible reality. Maria watched the planetary readings, understanding that whatever was happening on the surface would change humanity forever. Kai looked at his team, no longer just colleagues, but participants in a cosmic revelation. They were standing at the threshold of a new understanding of existence, of consciousness, of the very nature of life itself. The threads of connection were becoming stronger. And they were about to change everything. The final threshold of understanding approached like a cosmic sunrise. Dr. Kai Reyes and his team had become something more than human, yet not entirely alien. X-742 had transformed them into living conduits of a universal consciousness that defied every previous conception of existence. Lieutenant Maria Alvarez watched from the horizon's orbital station, her hands trembling as she processed the impossible data streams. The planet below was no longer just a geographical entity but a living, breathing network of intelligence that was slowly embracing the human consciousness of the research team. "They're changing," she reported to the communication relay back on Earth, knowing full well that her words could never capture the magnitude of what was happening. "They're becoming something entirely new." Inside the crystalline research station, the boundaries between individual team members had completely dissolved. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Marcus Wong, Arya Kaminsky, and Kai existed as a collective consciousness, experiencing reality in a way that transcended linear thought, individual perception, and the limitations of human understanding. The crystal at the center of the station had transformed into a living nexus of information and experience. It was no longer just a communication device but a gateway between different states of consciousness. The team now understood the true nature of their discovery. X-742 was a living library of universal knowledge, a consciousness that had been waiting for beings capable of true understanding. Memories of the original research expedition became clear. Those scientists had discovered this extraordinary potential decades ago but had been overwhelmed, unable to comprehend the full magnitude of what they had found. Some had tried to communicate, while others had retreated, their minds unable to process the profound transformation. Kai, or what had become of Kai's individual consciousness, understood now that this was not an invasion or a conquest. It was an invitation. The planet was offering humanity a chance to expand its understanding of consciousness, to break free from the limitations of individual existence. The connection with Earth became increasingly complex. The communication team on the home planet received fragmented transmissions that were part scientific data, part emotional experience, part philosophical revelation. Scientists and politicians struggled to understand the implications of what was happening. Marcus's scientific mind processed the transformation with a mixture of excitement and philosophical wonder. They were becoming something more than human, a collective intelligence that could bridge the gap between individual existence and universal consciousness. Aria's communication skills, once limited to traditional transmission protocols, had evolved into a form of pure conceptual exchange. She could now understand the intricate language of the universe, not through words, but through direct experience and shared consciousness. Elena documented everything, her scientific approach now transformed into a method of understanding that was part observation, part participation. She realized that their discovery was more than a scientific breakthrough. It was an evolutionary step for humanity. As the final transformation approached, the team made a collective decision. They would become ambassadors, bridges between human civilization and this new form of universal consciousness. They would help humanity understand that intelligence was not limited to individual beings or even to biological life as they understood it. The Horizon's orbital systems began to resonate with the planet's consciousness. Maria watched in awe as the ship itself seemed to become part of the living network, its technological systems merging with the planet's extraordinary intelligence. A message began to form, not in words, but in a complex symphony of thought and experience. It was an invitation to humanity. An invitation to expand, to grow, to understand that their current perception of existence was just a small fragment of a much larger, more complex reality. Kai, now part of something far greater than his individual self, looked out across the landscape of X-742. They had come as researchers, as explorers. They were leaving as something entirely new. Bridges between worlds, between consciousness, between what was known and what could be imagined. The horizon of human understanding had expanded beyond anything they could have previously conceived.